Hi, my name's Lisa Malyon, and today I'm presenting a range of slides to you. So these were presented on the 17th of March to the Ministry for Community, Housing and Local Government, and the Department for Health and Social Care. So, Lighten the Load, Water Damage and Indoor Air, a proactive public health-based approach. So for the presentation, I had my esteemed colleague by my side, Professor Michael Perrett, who is a building pathologist. A building pathologist is like a building surveyor who understands how a home works in terms of heat and air balance as well, and the fabric of the building. So my background was that I lived in this house, as you can see here. It's a townhouse, but you can see the roof there. It had extensive water damage, and we didn't realise. I became severely unwell, and so did my daughter shortly after she was born. And I ended up collapsing after a couple of years of many chest infections and just getting incrementally worse. Um, and that was because that we had all of this additional moisture in our home, and the materials that were surrounding us were releasing biotoxins into our air, making us unwell, and that was because they were holding water. My daughter is on this slide, Phoebe, and Phoebe basically has to take a preventative inhaler morning and night. I didn't get any better until we left the home, and then once we got to the new house, my health has been absolutely fine ever since. So we're going to have a look at microbial contamination in the body. So after the HHSRS was created, that was 2004. This then report came out from the World Health Organization, which is excellent, and it explains all about damp and mold in the home and what it does to the body. Um, I showed a video on the day on the 17th. I'm not going to show it now, but it was of this person here, a guy called Ridwan, who I've been working with for over a year now. And Ridwan was having daily seizures. So he was having seizures. They invited me into their home because the housing association had said there was no mold or damp. I went into the home. We put in dehumidifiers. We were taking around 23 litres of water out of the home every few days. And I also found in the cavity above the guy's bed, Ridwan's bed, there was basically it was thick with mold because there'd been a water event in the flat above, and then the water had been sitting in that cavity, become microbially active, and then the mold was hidden there and was obviously releasing all of its biotoxins into his air, which were causing a multisystemic impact on his health. So let's have a look at what's in our air. So when we've got damp and mold, you don't have to have visible mold. It could just be a damp wall. We are going to be getting fungal spores. Mold can be invisible. Fungal fragments, bacteria, endotoxins, mycotoxins. So mycotoxins are microbial volatile organic compounds, MVOCs, and these are really bad for our bodies. And this is how many you can have. So in a little kind of dice, you could have as many as 1 million spores in that area surrounding that person, and that will be basically coming off those water damaged materials around you. This is a great table showing it's from the European Environment Agency. The rest of Europe are well ahead of us. Unfortunately, we are behind. So this was only from last year, and it's showing here that two of the MVOCs associated with water damage in a building and the evidence that we have in terms of how they impact our health. So you can see it's the orange ones, it's the strong evidence legend that we're looking at here. So you've got immune system, digestive system, the liver and the kidneys. So this is why we're seeing multi-systemic health issues caused by damp homes. It's not just respiratory. So the risks to health, these are just some of the symptoms that people get when they live in water damaged buildings. And we'll come on to why some people have the symptoms and some people don't. But you can see here that postnasal drip, so that's basically like you've got a cough the whole time, and that's because you've got moisture and mucus building up and dripping down onto down the back of your nose, and that then goes onto the chest. Cancer, so aflatoxins are a microbial volatile organic compound. So the aflatoxins are released from mold, and some of those can be cancerous. Asthma, COPD, respiratory issues, they're the ones that we all kind of know because that's all of the evidence that we have here in the UK. Some people get nerve damage, skin conditions, depression. I personally had a neurological response to mold, and it was horrific. So at-risk groups. So naturally, a child, so minors are their body's still developing, and therefore they're at risk. So, for example, my daughter, her lungs were impacted because they were still developing when we were in the home with the water damage. So her lungs will never develop now into fully grown, good, strong adult lungs because she was so young when it was all happening. But also the elderly, obviously their bodies are not as strong in dealing with environmental harm. And then the other two on this side are really key to understand. So the top symbol, that is basically to represent people who are genetically susceptible to becoming very ill in a damp and mouldy building. So there is some very good evidence. We need more evidence, but there's every human being has a genotype, and as part of that genotype, we have a thing called the human lysolate gene, the HLA gene, and that HLA gene can have an allele, which is basically a blip, and that then means that those people with that HLA gene, DRDQ is one of them, that they are basically more susceptible to becoming very sick with multisystemic issues in a home with water damage. So that's around 1 in 4 people have that genotype. And that's why when, let's say, for example, you've got somebody can go into a room and not smell damp, but somebody can, and that's because that's their body warning them because they're probably more susceptible to the damp causing a problem. So this is the way our bodies are built. They're designed to survive, and that's why some people can smell it, some people can't, and that's because genetically we're all very different. And then finally, the bottom one, that broken shield, is basically those people that are immunocompromised. So it's a good 5% of society are either immunosuppressed because they have had, let's say, an organ transplant, or they are just immunocompromised. So their immune system is not working in the way it should for lots of different reasons. And then microbial contamination in the home. So water damage can hide anywhere. It doesn't, as I said, mold can be invisible. We've done mold tests, DNA swabs on what looks like a dry surface, and there's been mold there. So water damage can occur anywhere in a home. It might be from a flood. It could be from issues to do with the subfloor, the cavity walls, interstitial condensation. It can be anywhere. Water is amazing in the way in which it travels. It will go in every direction. And again, it can be hidden, it can be invisible, it can be in walls. So I've got lots of families who have chronic health issues. We find what's in the walls hidden under floorboards, etc. We remove them from the exposure and they get better. So we do know that this is having a direct impact on people's bodies. This is a quick fact about one of our case studies. So, two-bedroom flat, mother with two children. The child's bedroom with the asthma is next to the bathroom. The bathroom has a pull cord mechanical ventilation in the bathroom. There's no opening windows with restrictors, so there's no safe opening window for that mother. For example, if one of the children get into the bathroom, then they could get out of the window, and there's no outdoor drying space. So this flat is basically stacked up against this family's health. And let's have a look at the chain reaction. So pull cord mechanical ventilation means that all of that moisture is not leaving the room. It's because if she's not remembered to put it on, then you've got an immediate moisture problem. All you need for that moisture is to be there for a couple of days in a row, and then mold will grow because mold spores are ubiquitous, they're everywhere. They will land, and where the conditions, i.e., tiniest bit of moisture, allow, mold will grow, and then it colonize, and then it will grow and grow and grow until it is removed. So the mold growth is then on the ceiling. Every time mum runs a bath for the kids or has a shower, that's all being aerosolized, breathed in. Tenant becomes unwell. She has to take time off work. She ends up going on long-term sick leave. The sick child misses school. The children, their education attainment is impacted, which reduces their chance to earn and employability later on in life, and also means that they could end up then on benefits as well. So the NHS appointments, medication, all of that, if you're having a look over a 10-year period, the cost of a mold wash and block, which is the current status quo, even though it's absolutely, it shouldn't be, would cost, let's say, a housing association around 5 grand. But then over 10 years, the cost to taxpayers would be around 650,000 in benefits, all of the NHS costs, the fact that that mother and those children are not able to partake in society. All of those things are a massive burden on the UK. So now we're looking at quick fixes that are being introduced as part of kind of AWAB's law and even before AWAB's law. But positive input ventilation systems are horrendous. They are fitted into mouldy and kind of lofts that are not fit for living in, and therefore the G4 filters that they are fitted with as standard, they are basically then pulling all of contamination from that loft into the family's home. This is little Lizzie, and she was all well and everything, all fine. And then a PIV manufacturer and supplier came and fitted a PIV into a very, very mouldy, wet, water damaged loft space. And within a matter of weeks, this is the child. This is exactly what happened here. So her hair started falling out, her skin blistered, all of the blisters were bleeding constantly, and the body of the child basically just gave up, and she went into an anaphylaxis. You can see this is her brother here, and when he actually re-entered the home where we had all of this new mold contamination from the PIV, he would get instant nosebleeds from that contamination. So it just shows the impact that the air is having on these poor children's bodies. And now we're looking at damp tax. So as you can see here, this is from What's What, another one of the social enterprises that I have created to help promote a better Britain and protect people's health. So gas central heating in a dry room, you can see you're looking at about 20% additional cost to heat a damp home. And then also what tends to happen is that housing associations, council tenants, private landlord tenants, because they are struggling financially, they will then leave the gas central heating off and they'll start to use an electric heater, plug-in heater, which is 4 times the amount and obviously more if it's a damp property. But what that means is that that gas central heating then isn't keeping the fabric of the building dry, which means that there's a greater risk of damp and mold in that home. Cost to society is huge. Looking at just 136 UK households that I'm working with, I did a survey of them, and 82% reported reduced ability to work, 42% had lost their job or had to give up their job, and 29% of them have ended up on health-related benefits. And this is all caused by water damage in a home. And the greater cost, as the Building Research Establishment 2023 report provided, was around 15 to 18 billion pounds per year, in terms of cost to the NHS, but also those wider societal costs. It's absolutely huge. Microbial contamination and the status quo. So what's happening at the moment is you've got brands that are listed on the schedule of rates in social housing. And these brands are basically providing a biocide, which is a chemical that is then being slopped on, washed on, sprayed on a microbial contamination, which is a biological hazard. That then blows all of that up into the poor um, occupants' air. They then breathe that in and get sicker and sicker. So what should be happening is that we should be removing the mold. So we've created the UK Centre for Mold Safety to train people in safe remediation of mold. So here we've just written a paper based on the German Environment Agency, and in that it says biocide use is unnecessary and ineffective. Actually, what you need to be doing is removing the mold, and you can remove mold with soapy water and a microfiber cloth. If you think about a mold cell, the membrane of the mold cell is a lipid, a phospholipid. So what's really effective in removing that cell in its entirety and not blowing it up into smaller pieces is a degreasant, because then you can basically take it off and remove it out of the property without making matters worse for those within the property. A HEPA vacuum, so HEPA 13, 14 vacuum should be used, and what that does is it takes all of that invisible microbial contamination away by vacuuming it into a contained space, and then it doesn't let it out, and that's the HEPA part. So really important that we're getting this part right, because all we're doing at the moment, the status quo, is just blowing it up and making matters worse. And it's just this kind of wash, block, repeat mentality, which is not, it's costing us in terms of our public health. The only winners there are chemical companies who are telling us to do that, and they shouldn't be. So how should we deal with it? We just talked about that. We should be basically doing risk assessments. We should be looking at who's in the home, how are they impacted. We should be containing it. We should be removing it safely, as discussed just now. Things like water damage in a building. We should be, if there's a water event in a building, we should be drying it out within, we're starting to dry it out within 24 hours and finishing it within 48 hours to stop those materials becoming microbially active. Status quo in the UK today is that you have a water event, it dries out and you paint over it. That is then a microbially active surface, which is releasing all of those biotoxins into your air. And depending on your susceptibility as an individual, you can then become very sick because of that, and you just don't know it's that that's causing it. The built environment pathology then. So this is normally where Professor Mike comes in, but I can hopefully do a good job with this. So there's lots of ways that water can get into a building, and obviously we are generating moisture all the time inside the building. But if you have a look at a kind of a checklist of 50 things that a house we need to check off on every home and living environment, around 45 of those are down to the landlord. So that is making sure that water's not getting in, making sure that rainwater goods are effective and are removing water, making sure that the home isn't damp from underneath, so things like subfloor issues, condensation forming because solid floors aren't insulated. You can have things like interstitial condensation. You can have issues with thermal bridging in um, the void in a cavity wall. The floor, the ground level outside the property can be too high. Sometimes even the council has built up too high, stopping the homes from breathing. Rising damp, the debate, is there any such thing? There is such thing, but rising damp being caused by a failed chemical damp, um, um, sorry, failed by damp proof course is incredibly rare, and rising damp is incredibly rare. So what we do need to get away from is the kind of two-pin in a plaster board, which it's never been designed for. They're calibrated for use in wood, and for us to be using proper building pathology surveyors to really help us to understand why there is a damp problem in the building. And then and only then you then look at what's happening inside the building in terms of condensation. So the fabric of the building has got to be dry and pathologically able to maintain a healthy home environment, and then we look at the behaviours of the people within. These are some RICS bandings and average damp and mold jobs across those different types of archetype of home. And it just shows you that it's not just old homes that are getting damp and moldy or have damp and mold problems, it's all homes. And that is because we either do not know how to treat the homes. The status quo quite often has been chemical injection, and that doesn't work and shouldn't be used as a solution. And what we need to do is we really need to upskill people in understanding how to understand damp in a home, and remediate it properly. So this again is just talking about kind of, let's have a look at 21,396 properties belonging to a housing association. 11% of them had had a mold and damp job, at least one call out. And that's about right for about the same as the national average, I'm told. And then around 11% of those recorded have had one job, but then 7% have had two jobs, so gone out twice, and then 3% have had more than three damp and mold jobs recorded for the same one property, and that should never happen. You should never be needing to go back twice. You should be able to identify what's happening, and that's because the current surveying status quo is that you've got somebody that may not be a very good surveyor, they may not have the tools that they need, they may not know how to do diagnostic invasive surveying, and they're probably given 20 minutes to maximum of an hour to really try to understand the building, which is nowhere near enough time. So then you've got the claim farmers, the legal cases, and you've got every tenant is now an AI lawyer. So that's just going to be a massive cost to society. We do not want cases to get to a legal dispute. We want to be able to sort this and prevent it happening rather than people feeling the need to then go and get a lawyer and claim for damages. So this is the new era. This is what we want, we're calling for, and that is the warm dry home certification. To help if I could spell that right. So we're calling for systemic change to end wet lets. And how we're going to do that. So we want a proactive health-based approach. We want a new nationally recognised and government-funded building pathology surveying qualification. So just as a GP is qualified in being a general practitioner for health, we want the same for building pathology surveyors for buildings, and the homes and public buildings that we live and spend time in. So before being let, private or social sector landlords must have homes surveyed and certified by a qualified building pathologist. So no home can be let or sold or handed over without being checked that it is safe for a family to live inside. New builds, retrofitted, and older properties during voids must achieve certification. So, right now, what happens in social housing quite often is that the void, you've got to turn it around so quickly because there's massive homelessness issues, and we need to try and get families into homes. But what we do in doing that is that we're speeding ahead and we're putting people into homes that are not fit for habitation. I went to a home and did a healthy home survey for a very vulnerable family, and I found 13 defects, and this was a housing association property. 13 defects, and when I questioned why that had been allowed to happen, and the defects were things like it was just literally setting a home up for water damage, things like gaps in silicon that had just been put around the bath, gaps in grouting in the tiles. There was a on the backboard of under the sink in the kitchen. There was mold there. It hadn't even been removed. All of these issues, and that was because the housing association, who had had a third party contractor go in and do the work, hadn't then gone in and checked their work, but they were prepared to put a family in there until I intervened. So the void period, you're much better off extending the void period and getting it right first time, and also then checking the work of contractors in order to protect public health. And then, like an MOT, any fails will be listed for improvement, ready for a second inspection. So if it doesn't pass that healthy home MOT certification, then those advisories, like we have on a car, would then be listed and acted upon, and then a certification sign off would be done at the last stage. So this is, very kind of, I'm not going to go through it in detail, but you've got 22 things that a housing pathologist surveyor would check. So they would go in and they would do all of these checks on the home to make sure it's healthy. And this is what the qualification would cover. Water damage prevention needs to be considered in all homes, especially like high-rise flats, even maisonettes, anywhere where water damage above a living environment below could cause problems for by either being hidden in the cavity or actually then going through and causing a headache for those below. So things like tanking bathrooms should be done as standard. Other things we can be considering is mechanical ventilation with heat recovery for bathrooms to avoid condensation caused mold. Um, and also great places then for homes to be drying clothes in those rooms and not having to do that in dry rooms where they've not got drying facilities. And doing all of the things that we should be doing to prevent water damage in homes. And then here is a recap of the session. So, our homes determine our health, and our country's wealth is determined by everybody's health, and we need to protect people. And we can only do that by improving their living environments. Mold and water damage can ruin lives. Mold and water damage homes impact the UK economy. Mold and water damage is not currently being removed, it's being exacerbated by the very dangerous status quo of sploshing and spraying chemicals over these poor people's homes. We need to remove the mold. We do not need to blow it up by breaking the cell membrane. And then finally, mold and damp prevention is key. And we need this qualified building pathology survey qualification. That's really, really important. And that's what we're calling for government to help us to deliver. So my name is Lisa Malyon. I run the UK Centre for Mold Safety. There we offer free guides, downloadable guides. We're doing what the Health and Safety Executive did for asbestos, but we're doing that for mold for free as a public health campaign. I run Indoor Air Aware, which is helping families to understand what they're buying and bringing into their home, as well as what's happening because of the building pathology. I run What's What, and that is helping households to unlock heat hours to avoid damp and moisture damage in homes. And we try our best to educate households on the importance of ventilating in order to save on heat costs, which is quite counterintuitive for most. And then also, out of Indoor Air Aware, I created the Facebook group Mums versus Mold, which is home to just over 3,600 families who are all in real dire straits dealing with mold in their properties, and lots of them are tenants in private lets and housing association properties. So this is all about us all working together. We just need to do what's right for public health. It's not about blaming people. I got everything wrong. I was spraying chemicals all over my home, trying to deal with mold, and that's because it was available on the shelf at the local supermarket. And we must challenge what we're being sold. Buyer beware, and we must act in the interest of ourselves, public health, and the economy. Thank you for watching.